Because of why I search the deep through endless nights, no time to sleep. The call inside I can't deny. I'll find the light because of why.
Hey everyone, and welcome. So, let's talk about Pearl Harbor. It's one of those moments in history pretty much everyone knows about, right? The attack that pulled the United States headfirst into World War II. But the story of why it actually happened, well, that's a whole lot deeper and more complicated than you might think. It's a story about a nation's ambition, its desperation, and a massive, high-stakes gamble that had been brewing for decades. We've all heard President Roosevelt's famous words, calling it a date which will live in infamy. And it certainly was. But behind that single day is this long, tangled story. It's a geopolitical chess match that went horribly wrong. So let's really get into it. What pushed Japan to make such a drastic and ultimately fatal decision?
To really get the picture, we can't start in 1941. We have to rewind the clock way back to the late 1800s. See, Japan was going through this incredible transformation, racing to catch up with the rest of the world. But they had one huge, unavoidable problem looming over everything.
Okay, so after being closed off for centuries, Japan's leaders took a look around and saw Western empires basically carving up Asia. They knew they had a choice: modernize or get colonized. So they went all in on a massive push to build a powerful modern military and economy, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the big powers of the world. And here's the catch. This is the core problem. To power all those new factories, to build all those new warships, you need stuff. You need oil, you need steel, you need rubber, and Japan, as a nation of islands, had practically none of it. For all the things it needed most, it was completely dependent on other countries. So what's the plan when you need resources you just don't have? Well, for Japan, the answer was to go out and take them. This timeline, it shows a really clear pattern over almost 50 years. Each war, each invasion was a calculated move to get the raw materials they needed to fuel their ambitions. And that massive war in China especially, it just made their need for resources more and more desperate. Now all of this expansion in Asia was bound to tick off another major power, and that power was the United States. And America's response wasn't to send ships and soldiers, not at first. They decided to fight back with money and resources. You see, the US was actually one of Japan's biggest suppliers of oil and steel, so they started to tighten the screws. First, they cut back on things like scrap metal and fuel for planes. But then, in the summer of '41, they dropped the hammer. First, they froze all of Japan's money in US banks, so they couldn't buy anything. And then came the knockout blow, a full oil embargo. That single move cut off over 80% of Japan's oil supply. Just like that, their entire war machine was put on a timer. And this quote, it really nails how Japan saw the situation. From their perspective, this wasn't just a political disagreement anymore. This was economic war. It was a stranglehold that threatened their very existence as a modern nation. So by late 1941, with the oil taps turned off, Japan's leaders felt like they were completely trapped. They were staring down a choice between a few options, and honestly, all of them were terrible. Wow. This metaphor from one of their top naval commanders is so telling. It just paints this picture of total desperation. The serious illness, of course, was their vanishing supply of oil and resources. And in their minds, the only thing that could save the patient, the Japanese Empire, was a radical, incredibly dangerous surgery. Let's break down the choices from their point of view. Option 1, capitulate. Basically give in to everything the US wanted. To them, that felt like total national humiliation. Option 2, wait, just do nothing. But that was just a slow death. Their oil would be gone in less than 2 years, which left only option 3, go to war. A huge all-or-nothing gamble to seize the oil fields in Southeast Asia by force.
And this quote from Admiral Nagano really drives the point home. Waiting wasn't a real option. The longer they waited, the weaker their military would get, while the American military would just keep getting stronger. The clock was ticking, and they truly believed if they were going to act, it had to be now.
So they chose the gamble. They chose war. But that still leaves a huge question. Why Pearl Harbor? Why launch a surprise attack on some naval base thousands of miles away in the middle of the Pacific?
And this is the key. The attack on Pearl Harbor was never about conquering America. It was a preemptive strike, a knockout punch. In order to grab all those resources in Southeast Asia, they had to first take out the one thing that could stop them, the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet, which was conveniently docked for them right there in Hawaii.
So here was the plan, step by step. 1. Absolutely cripple the U.S. fleet. 2. Use the 6 to 12 months of breathing room that buys you to conquer all of Southeast Asia and get the oil. 3. Build a massive defensive ring across the Pacific. And 4. Hope that a shocked and demoralized America would be willing to cut a deal for peace rather than fight a long, bloody war.
But behind all the grand strategy, all the politics, there's always a real human cost. And this number, 2,335, that represents the American sailors, soldiers, and airmen who lost their lives on that Sunday morning. It's the terrible price of that strategic gamble.
As a military operation, the attack on Pearl Harbor was, for Japan, a stunning success. But as a long-term strategic move, it turned out to be one of the biggest miscalculations in history.
This legendary quote, which they say came from the architect of the attack himself, Admiral Yamamoto, it just perfectly captures the tragic irony of it all. Instead of scaring America into submission, the attack united a furious nation and unleashed its full, unbelievable industrial and military power. They didn't cripple their enemy, they woke a sleeping giant.
And that brings us to the big question that historians still debate today. When you look at the whole picture, the sanctions, the desperation, was this war truly inevitable? Or was there a different path, a diplomatic way out that both sides somehow missed? I would absolutely love to hear what you think down in the comments. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this explainer. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. I'll see you on the next one.